Day 71, and I'm feeling accomplished. Accomplished why? Well, as I have been working on for the past several days, the horror Standee for the Horror A4, my independent kaiju comic, which is what the 100 days is to be working on. The horror Standee is done in terms of the art being done. Now, that also means the horror print is done in terms of the art being done. It's a little after 5. It's going to be too late to go and get the prints made today, but today is Wednesday. Thursday I can go get the prints made, and then barring any unforeseen difficulties, I will have them for the show Saturday. Not the Standee, but the print of the horror, the original art. It'll actually be the... I'm trying to think if this might be the first... Well, no, it won't be the first art print I've sold of my own original work, because I did have some prints of just random zombies and things like that in the past mixed in, but not a lot, and they never sold very well. This will be the first piece of art from my own character, from my own creation, from my own ongoing IP, intellectual property as it were, and more specifically for my comic, that I will have to sell. Now, I made a print of the cover of the first issue, naked, vanilla, stripped down all the logos and stuff off, but I only made enough to give to my Kickstarter backers, and that's it, and I'm not selling it anymore. And even that was repurposed artwork. Now, arguably, this is repurposed artwork because it's for a Standee, but I also had in mind that it would be a print as well, and I designed it as such and put in extra background details and things like that, knowing that it would be a print. So it's kind of exciting because prints definitely make me more money than my comic. By far. It's not even close. And I'm now wondering, if I will be able to sell this print. I know it won't sell as well as one of my Godzilla prints, but if somebody's buying a Godzilla print and there's my monster too, I'm like, oh, and here's my monster, or I run a deal off and they're $10 each for prints, but, maybe if you get 3, maybe I'll give you 3 for 25 if I'm feeling, the mood or whatever. So maybe I'll be like, hey, get these 2, you can have one of the Horror A4 for just $5 more or something like that. So I know they won't sell as well as my known monster stuff, but I also feel that even if they don't sell very well, they're going to sell better than the comic, because the comic doesn't sell well at all. And I've talked about this before. It might be my sales pitch, it might be the fact that my table is not really geared as a comic book selling table, but more as hey, I'm an artist, also I have this comic. So that's something that's going to be adjusted, hopefully also when I get the full-size Standee. But for this particular show, it's only a one-day show, I will be specifically, the last show I tried to focus on, let me sell some, sketch covers. And I'll still do that if it's, available. The clientele, that is, but I'm going to try to be pushing this print, and then in conjunction with it, the comic. But I'll be like, oh, here's Godzilla, here's that. You like that? Check out this one. You recognize that guy? And play that game a lot. Oh, you knew all those. Who's that? You don't know that one. That's because that's the Horror A4. That's my kaiju. Hurrah! Who am I? I'm Gazbot. Also, here's a comic. Beep. And so we'll see how many I can sell. And I'm thinking if I sell 5, I'll be happy. If I sell more than that, I'll be ecstatic. But generally, if a print I have sells 5 in a day, that's not a bad selling print. My top sellers might do 10 or 20 or some crazy amount, But, all of my prints have a chance of selling 1 in a show or 2 in a show. It's just kind of random one-offs. But 3, 4, 5, 6 is when it's okay, that's worth reprinting. That's worth bringing in every show. So if I could sell 5, I'll feel good, even if I'm the one giving it that push. So I'm going to cut here, and I'm going to show you what I've done, and then I'm going to go on with my day, and we'll catch up later after you see this.
Yes, here's the final product, the Horror A4 Standee. As I scroll down manually, you can see his feet completely covered, work wasted. Look at the building detail I've covered with smoke. Look at the smoke detail I've covered with other smoke. Look at the everything I've covered with everything. A multi-layered masterpiece? Well, it's done, that's for sure. Now, I needed to make it a print, and you can see over here, it's the same exact image, but cropped. I didn't crop it horizontally at all. I only cropped it vertically, right about here. So you're basically losing all that detail, and this is the print I will be making tomorrow. Hopefully everyone will find it very compelling, and the colors will bring them to my table, and they will throw money at me and ask all about this lovely new monster.
That was it! The Horror A4 Standee art done. Now, like I said, I have to crop it a bit for the print, and that will be something that I'll handle either later tonight or tomorrow. But I have to do other things, including go out and pick up a suit for a wedding, and then do my 30 minutes. Okay, on to question and answer / story time. I put out a thing earlier today just saying, hey everybody, you got any questions? You got any things you want to hear me talk about? And I got a fair amount of responses. So thank you to everyone that responded. Some were less serious than others, but all were read and most were liked. I shall respond to all that I can, not just today. I'll spread it out a little bit, because part of the thing was I was running out of stuff to talk about off the top of my head every single day. And if I didn't have an adventure, then it was just like, here's what I drew. So this is a way to get my juices going, my brain juices. So the first question I'm going to paraphrase, but I will put it up verbatim on the screen. And it was from Chris McQuinlan, that lovely lad that we all know. He used to be on the cereal boxes back in the 80s, and then he went away, and then now he's back again because it's Halloween. So Chris McQuinlan wanted to know regarding backgrounds. When I'm drawing backgrounds, he didn't specify comics or pinups, but I guess it doesn't really matter. When I'm doing backgrounds, do I make things up? Do I populate it out of my own imagination, like furniture and things like that, or do I use reference? And you know, what is the ratio there to, or whatever? Like I said, I'm paraphrasing. But how do I do backgrounds? Right. The answer is that I mostly do it out of my head, which makes it harder, makes it less accurate, makes it take longer. It's a bad way to do it. It's mostly what I do. Here's the thing though. When I was getting into art in the beginning, it was very much the image age, and it was very much all about drawing like, with like lines and fire and a spike and a this and a hair and like, and then it's like, oh, I need backgrounds too, so I'll throw some flying rocks and I'll throw, you know. And so eventually I needed to on some of those panels, I did have to have somebody sitting down or at a table, and I was always making stuff up. And very quickly I was like, wow, I don't know what anything looks like. Like I remember one specific panel that was from a comic I did called The Staff, and it was like this paramilitary group, and there's some general or something talking like, hey group, and he's supposed to be at his desk. But it's like, it looked like he was at a judge's table. Like it was like looking down, and there was no features whatsoever. It was like a top bar and then flat. And so to fill that, I used to use rapidographs, which are kind of like microns, but they're refillable. People don't use them as much anymore because they're not as necessary. But I had bought the skinniest one I could, because again, I was in an image and I like Todd McFarlane and all those little tiny lines. So I thought if I get the smallest pen possible, hey, I'll draw like an image guy. And there was some truth to that though, because I don't remember the diameter, but it was like, it looked like a hair. And I used it for, you know, a few months, and then it eventually got jammed up and broke. And it was like a $20-something pen, which is a lot now, but it was even more as a kid. It was like I had a part-time job working at a hobby store making less than a minimum wage, or about minimum wage. And so it was like more than that. It was basically a day's work to buy this pen. And so anyway, I'll see if I can find the picture. I'll throw it up here so you can see what I'm talking about. But it was, you know, super high up, in nowhere, like a void of everything behind him. And I realized that this looks too blank, but I didn't know what a table looked like. And I could have looked at a table in my house, which would have been inaccurate for the type of table a general would use, but it still would have been a table, an office desk, you know, maybe not, but it'd be a table. But I didn't. What I did instead was like make a million little lines. Like I made it gray by drawing a million little lines, and it took forever. And this goes back to something, I've always been a hard worker. I haven't always been a good artist. I don't even know if I'm a good artist now, but I've always been a hard worker. I've always been a professional. Once I can sit down and do it. I mean, sometimes I have a hard time sitting down to do it, but once I'm working on something, any drawing I do might not be good, but it won't be bad for lack of effort. It might be misguided effort. It might be incorrect effort. It might be, you know, but I will put the effort in. I will try my hardest, and sometimes to my detriment. But this was a perfect example of that. So after a while doing that, I started realizing I do need to use reference. But I still used it kind of sporadically. Like okay, I kind of know what this looks like. What does that chair look like? Let me look up a chair. And sometimes I would draw the chair once and then kind of fake it in. And, you know, I try not to rely on reference too heavily. Not that I think it's a bad thing. I mean, I've definitely gotten over that thing of like, reference is cheating. Like, no, reference is a powerful tool that all the best artists use. But I find myself a lot of times, if I'm drawing and I'm not home, if I don't have access to the internet and I have reference, then I just can't draw it, you know, or I take so long to draw things anyway that like looking up reference takes me a long time, and then actually finding an angle I could use or something takes me a long time. So it's a sort of an expediency thing that I don't use more reference than I do. However, I do use reference, especially if I'm doing like a school bus, or if I'm doing, you know, a specific type of recliner chair or things like that. But I won't, what'll usually happen is I'll reference like a TV once, and then I won't reference it again for a year or two. And I'll kind of like have permutations of that first one, and at some point I might be like, nah, these TVs aren't looking so good, and I'll do it again. But I try to internalize it as much as I can, which again isn't necessarily the best way to do it. That's just how I do it. Now with this particular book, The Horror A4, it's a sort of semi-futuristic version of our world. It's you know, I always say it's sort of like take our world and then put this little like filter template over. Like if you play video games and it's like, oh, let's put on this skin on this game. So it's the same basic game, but it's just a little different. That's how the world is there. So they have a lot of the same stuff, but like, you know, they have like smartphones, but they look different. They're a little bit better, but they're bulkier. And, you know, so I'm designing things like that. When I'm designing things like that, obviously I'm not using reference. Although in some cases, I'll base it on partial reality. We're like, okay, I want to create a truck or something. This is not a real example, but I want it to be like a different truck. So I might look at a real army truck and then throw a bunch of crap on it, and now it's not what the reference was at all, but that just kind of gave me an idea where to start. And a lot of times with like chairs and things like that, because it's sort of this future of the world, and chairs, even on our world, there's a gazillion types of chairs. Now, arguably, I should look up reference because not so much for the chair, but for how tall the seat's going to be for the butt to sit in it, so a human could actually sit in it, because I have that problem a lot, where I'll design some chair that looks fine, and it looks, you know, like it could fit in this environment, and then when people sit in it, it's weird, you know, so I probably should use more reference than I do, even for my futuristic, alter world stuff, and I certainly use more than I used to, but more often than not, I do it out of my head, and then if I have a real hard time getting it out of my head, I'll look at reference, which is sort of the backwards way of doing it. I did do a lot of reference searching when I was starting the Horror A4 in general, and it was less of a specific, oh, here is, you know, the exact thing I'm going to use, more just like when I was doing the construction equipment from the first issue, I just got a bunch of construction equipment and put it up, and I didn't copy any one, but I like, oh, I'll use the treads from that one, and I'll use the crane hook from that one, and then make a bunch of other stuff in there, you know. And so I do that a lot. And in the beginning of this issue, before I started, I grabbed a bunch of reference for various buildings, like the library front and things like that. But then other things like Dan's bar, I completely made that up. The front is not based on any real building. I mean, I looked at some pictures of rundown neighborhoods and buildings, but I didn't copy any of them. The sign I completely made up inside. And this all, I've talked about this, it makes it harder because I'm kind of creating the blueprint of the whole thing. I'm like, okay, well, there's going to be booths kind of like at a restaurant, and then there's a bar, and then there's some tables, and then there's like an easy chair, and it's in the basement, so there's support beams, but I'm kind of making it all up. Like, it probably wouldn't make any sense in the real world, and I'm just trying to make it passable. Yeah, I thought I might answer more than one question, but that was a pretty long answer. So anyway, I appreciate the question, and if you had a question or suggestion, stay tuned. It might still be coming. But for now, I hope I've answered your question, Chris McQuinlan, our pal, Serial Mogul. All right, thanks a lot. Let's see what's going on with the 30 minutes on the Horror A4. Gazbot? Welcome to the end of the day. It's a little after 11. I need to go to Target, but before I do, let me show you what I've done here. As is my wont lately, a bit over 30 minutes, closer to 45. However, I did finally finish this first panel, basically populating it with more junk and things and putting some background detail through the doorway to the next room hallway thing, and putting some shading in. It's amazing what a little bit of shading will do to fill things out. Then, now that I have the background set, I came down to this panel and filled in his background because I know what it is and added a little shading there. So I need to populate these with background and do whatever's here, which I don't remember off the top of my head, and page will be done. I say that like it'll be done in 10 seconds. It'll probably be a few more days with my current slow rate, but this is the work done today on the Horror A4. So there you have it, cats and kittens. That's the end of today. Day 71. Last line of today is being day 71. Well, Jimmy, tell what that means. Q, I know you're playing Warcraft, but can you tell us how many days we got left?
29?
Very good.
I listened to you through osmosis while playing WoW.
You listened through osmosis?